You push your cart through those wide Walmart doors, list in hand, and you already know half of what you buy will spoil, get wasted, or cost you double what it should. That ends today. Here is what I found. The cheapest shelves in that entire store, the ones most people walk right past, hold food that older families stretched into weeks of meals for pennies, and nutritionists are now quietly admitting those forgotten choices beat the expensive ones. This is not a new trend. This is knowledge our grandparents used every single week. Knowledge, convenience, culture buried on purpose. Stay with me, because near the end I will show you a method written down in a United States Department of Agriculture bulletin from 1917, a wartime thrift instruction so simple you can do it this weekend with a single item already sitting in your kitchen. And every one of these works with what you already own. No gadgets, no membership, no special trip. I still remember standing in my grandmother's narrow kitchen in 1998, watching her turn what looked like scraps into a pot of food that fed 9 people, and thinking she was just being cheap. I was wrong. She knew something I had forgotten how to know. For years I did it the modern way. I bought the pre-cut, the pre-washed, the pre-packaged, the single-serving everything. I paid for convenience and I threw away the difference in the trash every Thursday night. And it took me a long time and a lot of wasted money to understand that the people who came before us were not poor at this. They were rich in a kind of knowing that we traded away for a plastic clamshell and a smiling label. So let me hand you what I collected. Let me hand it to you like the inheritance it actually is. Let me start with the one that made me feel foolish for years, because I walked past it on every single trip. You know that rack near the produce section, or sometimes near the bakery, with the bright clearance stickers slapped on bags of fruit, dented cans, and bread marked down to almost nothing? Most people see that rack and think spoiled, think old, think something must be wrong with it. I thought the exact same thing. Here is what is actually happening. Grocery stores, Walmart included, are legally required to move products before a sell-by date that, in most cases, has nothing to do with safety. The sell-by date is a stocking instruction for the store, not a warning for you. The United States Department of Agriculture has stated plainly that, apart from infant formula, product dating is not required by federal law, and those dates refer to quality, not safety. A bag of apples marked down 70% because one apple has a soft spot is not dangerous. It is dinner for 3 days. Back during the Second World War, wasting food was treated almost like a moral failure. The United States government ran entire campaigns telling families that a clean plate was patriotic. In 1942, home economists were teaching women to inspect, salvage, and use every part of what they bought, because throwing food away meant throwing away the labor of soldiers and farmers. That instinct, that automatic glance that says, this is still good, I can use this, we simply lost it. So here is exactly what to do. When you walk in, go to that clearance rack first, before your eyes get tired and your cart gets full. Pick up the marked down produce and look at it the way my grandmother looked at everything, closely and without fear. Bananas gone spotty are perfect for baking or freezing. Bruised apples become sauce in 20 minutes. Day-old bread makes the best toast, the best stuffing, the best bread pudding you have ever tasted. I now buy 3 or 4 bags of marked down peppers, chop them, and freeze them flat, and I cook from that freezer for a month. The savings are not small. I tracked mine for 8 weeks, and I was spending roughly $40 less every single week just by starting my trip at that one rack. That is more than $2,000 a year for walking 10 extra steps. But cheap food means nothing if it rots before you eat it. And that is the exact trap most people fall into. They buy well and then watch it die in the crisper drawer. So the next thing I learned was not about buying at all. It was about making food last far longer than the store ever wanted you to believe it could. Let me ask you something. How many times have you bought a bunch of fresh herbs, used a third of it, and watched the rest turn to black slime in 3 days? For most of my adult life, that was every single week. Cilantro, parsley, green onions, all of it, bought with good intentions and thrown out with quiet guilt. I assumed fresh herbs were just fragile. I assumed that was the price of eating well. Then I found the method, and it turns out it is older than refrigeration itself. Long before anyone had an electric icebox, people kept greens alive by treating them like what they are, which is cut flowers. A stalk of parsley is a living thing that is still drinking. In the 1800s, root cellars and cool pantries kept herbs and greens crisp for weeks using nothing but moisture control and cold, steady air. The knowledge was ordinary. Every household ran on it. Here is exactly how you do it tonight with a jar you already own. Take your bunch of herbs, trim a little off the bottom of the stems, and stand them upright in a glass or jar with about an inch of water, just like a bouquet. For the leafy soft herbs, drape a loose plastic bag over the top and put the whole thing in the refrigerator door. For hardier greens, the same water trick keeps them alive. I have kept cilantro fresh and green for nearly 3 weeks doing this, when it used to die in 4 days. Green onions are even better. Stand the white root ends in a little water on your windowsill and they regrow. You cut what you need, they grow back, and one bunch that cost under $1 becomes an endless supply. A study from a university extension program confirmed that green onions regrown in water retain their nutrients through multiple cuttings. My grandmother had a jar of them on her sill for as long as I can remember, and I never once asked her why. I thought it was decoration. The Cornell University Extension Service has published detailed storage guidance showing that proper humidity and temperature can extend the life of leafy produce by many days beyond what most people ever get. The information exists. It is free. It has simply been drowned out by companies who would much rather sell you herbs in a plastic tube every week than have you keep one bunch alive for a month. And that word, drowned out, is where this story starts to turn. Because once I began paying attention, I noticed something that genuinely bothered me. The methods that saved me the most money were always the ones nobody was advertising. There is no commercial for a jar of tap water. There is no glossy campaign for the clearance rack. The most valuable knowledge in that entire grocery store was the knowledge that made the store the least amount of money. Hold on to that thought, because it only gets clearer from here. Let me take you to the aisle that older shoppers understood better than anyone. The aisle modern marketing spent decades teaching you to feel embarrassed about. Walk down the canned and dried goods section and watch how people shop. They grab the fancy pouches, the pre-seasoned mixes, the single-serving cups with a picture of a happy family on the front, and they walk right past the plain bags of dried beans, the sacks of rice, the big bag of oats, the humble canned tomatoes. Those plain items are treated like a last resort. For our grandparents, they were the foundation of everything. Here is a number that stopped me cold. 1 pound of dried beans, which cost somewhere around $1.50, cooks up into roughly 3 pounds of finished food and delivers a serving of protein for less than 15 cents. Compare that to a can of the same beans, which costs more, gives you less, and often comes loaded with added salt. Now compare it to a pouch of pre-made bean dip. You are paying, in some cases, 10 times as much for the exact same beans just because someone did the soaking for you. During the Great Depression, dried beans and rice were not a sad choice. They were survival, and they were smart. In the 1930s, home economists at land-grant universities were publishing recipes teaching families how to combine beans, grains, and small amounts of meat to build complete, satisfying, nourishing meals for a family of 6 on almost nothing. Nutritionists today, with all our modern science, are landing right back on the same conclusion. Beans and whole grains together form a complete protein. They lower cholesterol, they keep you full for hours. The American Heart Association now actively recommends the very foods our grandparents ate because they had no other option. So here is exactly what to do. Buy the plain dried beans. The night before you cook, cover them in plenty of water and let them soak overnight. The next day, drain them, cover them in fresh water, and simmer them slow for an hour or two with an onion, a clove of garlic, a bay leaf, whatever you have. That is it. You just made 3 pounds of protein-rich food for about $1.50. Portion it, freeze half. You now have meals waiting for you, and do not overlook the big bag of oats. Not the little flavored packets, which are mostly sugar and cost 4 times as much. The plain rolled oats, cooked with water and whatever fruit you saved from that clearance rack, is a breakfast that costs pennies and keeps you full until lunch. In 1901, oatmeal was so central to the American breakfast that home manuals gave a dozen ways to prepare it. We replaced all of that with a cereal box and a cartoon character. Now, I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now, because I thought it too. You are thinking this all sounds fine for someone with time, someone with a big kitchen, someone who can plan every meal a week ahead. You are tired, you work, you do not have a pantry the size of a closet or a free evening to soak beans. So let me talk directly to you for a minute, because this next part is built for exactly your life, and it needs nothing but what is already in your house right now. You do not need a single new tool. You do not need a special container. You do not need to reorganize your whole life. You need a freezer, which you already have, and you need to change one small habit. Here it is. Stop throwing away the ends of things. That is the entire method, and it is worth real money. Every time you cook, you create what you think is garbage. The tops of carrots, the papery ends of onions, celery bottoms, herb stems, the bones from a roast chicken, the soft mushroom you almost tossed. For generations, none of that was garbage. It was the beginning of the next meal. My great aunt kept a bag in her freezer and everything went in it, and I honestly thought it was a strange habit of an old woman who had lived through hard times. It turns out she was running her kitchen the way every efficient household ran before we were taught that scraps were beneath us. Here is what you do, starting with your very next meal. Keep one bag or one container in your freezer. Every vegetable scrap that is clean and good, the peels, the ends, the stems, goes into that bag instead of the trash. When the bag is full, you dump it into a pot, cover it with water, add a little salt, and let it simmer for about an hour. Then you strain it. What you are left with is rich, homemade vegetable stock, the base for soups, for rice, for gravy, for stews, and you made it entirely from things you were about to pay to have hauled away. If what you have heard so far feels like something you want to hold on to and actually use, I put the deeper system into a book, Smart Basics, Deep Frugal, and System Complete, where every method is laid out step by step, from the clearance rack walk to the freezer habits, so you have it in your hands whenever you need it, not just in one video. You will find the link in the description below. Now, let me take you to the aisle that older shoppers understood better than anyone, the aisle modern marketing spent decades teaching you to feel embarrassed about. That same chicken carcass, the one you would normally toss after Sunday dinner, makes a bone broth so good and so nourishing that people now pay $7 or $8 a cup for it in fancy stores. You throw the bones in a pot with your saved scraps, cover with water, add a splash of vinegar to pull the minerals out of the bones, and let it go low and slow for a few hours. The vinegar trick, by the way, is straight out of old farmhouse kitchens, and it works because a little acid helps draw the calcium and minerals from the bone into the broth. I started doing this 3 years ago, and I have not bought a carton of stock since. Not one. At around $3 a carton, and going through maybe 2 a week, that is over $300 a year, I simply stopped spending using nothing but the parts of food I was already throwing away. Nothing new entered my house. I just stopped throwing away the value I had already paid for. And this is the moment the whole picture snapped into focus for me, and it made me a little angry. Honestly, because I realized we were not taught to throw these things away by accident. Somewhere along the line, a lot of very smart people and a lot of very profitable companies figured out that if they could convince you that scraps were garbage, that the plain bag was for poor people, that fresh food was too fragile to keep, then you would come back and buy the packaged version again and again and again forever. Let me show you how deep that goes, because the next one is the one that truly changed how I see that entire store. There is a whole category of food in Walmart that is designed to make you pay for water and air, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Think about it. You buy pre-shredded cheese, and you pay more per pound than the block, and the shreds are dusted with added starch to keep them from clumping, starch you did not ask for and do not want. You buy pre-washed lettuce in a bag, and you pay triple, and it goes slimy in half the time because it has been cut and handled and sealed in a bag with its own moisture. You buy pre-cut fruit, and you pay double for someone else to hold the knife. Our grandparents would have found this baffling. The idea of paying extra money for less food that spoils faster would have made no sense to a woman who ran a household in 1940. She bought the block of cheese and grated what she needed. She bought the head of lettuce and washed it when she wanted it. The whole form of the food kept it alive longer, and it cost less, and there was no starch and no plastic and no slime. Here is the science that backs the old habit. Every time you cut into a fruit or vegetable, you break its cells and expose the inside to air, and that is when decay begins and nutrients start to fade. A whole carrot lasts weeks. A shredded carrot lasts days. A block of cheese keeps for a long time in the refrigerator. Shredded cheese, with all that extra surface exposed to air, dries out and molds faster. You are paying more to get a product that is scientifically guaranteed to die sooner. So here is what to do. And it costs you nothing but a few extra minutes across a week. Buy the block of cheese and grate it yourself when you need it, or grate a batch and keep it in a container. Buy the whole head of lettuce or the bunch of greens and wash them when you eat them, not before. Buy the whole fruit and cut it yourself. A box grater and a knife are the only tools you need, and you already have both. I timed it once, and grating a week's worth of cheese took me under 4 minutes, and it saved me nearly $2 a pound. Now, let me give you a specific storage trick for that whole lettuce, because this is the part people miss. When you get a head of lettuce or a bunch of leafy greens home, do not seal it up wet and do not seal it up bone dry. Wrap it loosely in a clean, slightly damp cloth or paper towel and put it in the crisper drawer. The gentle moisture keeps the leaves from wilting, and the loose wrap lets them breathe so they do not rot. This is exactly how cool pantries kept greens crisp 100 years ago, before any of us had a plastic bag to trust. The pattern is now impossible to ignore. Over and over, the convenient version costs more, spoils faster, and gives you less. And every time, the older, plainer, slower way wins on money, on nutrition, and on time saved from not running back to the store. This was not a coincidence. This was a business model, and you and I were the ones paying for it. Which brings me to the thing I most wanted to hand you, the one that ties all of this together and that almost nobody talks about anymore. Let me take you back to 1917, to a document I found while I was digging through old government archives, because this is where the real inheritance is. In 1917, the United States had entered the First World War, and food was suddenly precious. The government created a whole effort to teach ordinary families how to waste absolutely nothing, and the United States Department of Agriculture, along with the National War Garden Commission, put out bulletins and thrift guides that went into millions of homes. These were not vague suggestions. They were precise, tested instructions for stretching every ingredient to its absolute limit. And buried in that wartime teaching was a method for one single, cheap, common item that most people today throw straight in the trash without a second thought. The item is a lemon, or really any citrus you buy, and the forgotten method turns one lemon into 3 separate uses, so that a piece of fruit you thought was worth one squeeze is actually worth several times what you paid. Here is how it works, and here is why the wartime cooks swore by it. When you buy a lemon, most people cut it, squeeze out the juice, and throw the rest away. But the peel, the outer yellow skin, holds more flavor and more of the fruit's oils than the juice ever did. Those thrift guides taught women to first take the zest, the colored outer layer, and dry it or use it fresh, because a spoonful of that zest can flavor a whole dish, a whole cake, a whole pot, replacing expensive flavorings they could not get during the war. That is use number 1, and it is the part you have been throwing away. Use number 2 is the juice, which everyone knows, but the old guides taught you to get more of it. Roll the lemon hard on the counter under your palm before you cut it, and warm it slightly, and it gives up nearly twice the juice. Nothing wasted, nothing left behind in the pulp. And use number 3, the one that made me sit back in my chair, is the spent peel after the juice is gone. Those wartime households did not throw it out. They dropped the used lemon and orange peels into a jar and covered them with plain white vinegar, and they let it sit for a couple of weeks. What they made was a natural cleaning liquid, a citrus-scented all-purpose cleaner strong enough to cut grease on a stove and shine up a sink, made entirely from garbage and the cheapest vinegar in the store. One lemon, bought for cooking, became flavor and juice and a bottle of household cleaner you would otherwise pay $4 or $5 for. Think about what that means. During the leanest years this country ever faced, families were taught to pull 3 or 4 full uses out of a single piece of fruit, and they did it as a matter of course, and then we forgot every bit of it. Not because it stopped working. It works exactly as well today as it did in 1917. We forgot it because forgetting it was profitable for everyone except us. When you throw the peel away, you buy zest in a jar, and you buy cleaner in a bottle, and you buy juice in a plastic lemon, 3 products to replace what one real lemon already gave you for free. That is the whole secret, and it is bigger than lemons. It is a way of seeing. The wartime thrift guides were teaching a single idea across every ingredient, which is that almost nothing you bring home is truly single use. The scraps make stock. The bones make broth. The green onion regrows. The bruised apple becomes sauce. The lemon peel becomes cleaner. The plain bag of beans becomes a week of dinners. Every item wants to give you more than one gift, and we were taught carefully and profitably to accept only the first one and throw the rest away. Someone preserved this knowledge. A government clerk in 1917 typed it into a bulletin. A home economist in the 1930s printed it in a pamphlet. A grandmother in 1998 kept a jar of green onions on her windowsill and a bag of scraps in her freezer. And she did it without explaining it, because to her it was just how you lived. It survived quietly in old documents and old habits, waiting, and now it is in your hands, and you can start using it this weekend with the lemon already sitting in your kitchen and the vinegar already under your sink. You did not lose your ability to do this. It was taken gently, one convenient product at a time, and tonight you are taking it back. I want you to notice how it feels to know this, because that feeling, that quiet click of yes, of course, that is what was stolen from us. Not just the money, though the money is real and it adds up to thousands of dollars a year. What was taken was the simple confidence that you can look at a piece of food and know how to get everything it has to give. You are the kind of person who would rather know a thing than keep paying for it. That is why you stayed to the end of this. You are not cheap and you are not fussy. You are someone who refuses to be quietly billed week after week for knowledge that used to be free and ordinary and shared across every kitchen table in the country. So let me ask you one specific thing, and I really want you to answer this one. Did your grandmother or someone in your family keep a jar of something on the windowsill, or a bag of scraps in the freezer, or a habit you never understood until right now? Tell me what it was. Leave it in a comment, because when you share yours, someone else reads it and remembers their own, and that is exactly how this knowledge comes back to life. And tell me where you are watching from, because I love knowing how far this reaches. If any part of this made you see that grocery store differently, then you belong here with the rest of us who are quietly taking back the practical knowledge that convenience culture sold off without asking. This is not about supporting a channel. This is about rebuilding a way of living that worked for generations, one recovered method at a time. Subscribe and stand with the people who refuse to keep paying for what they can simply know. And next time, I am going to show you the forgotten way our grandparents kept eggs fresh for months without a refrigerator, a method written down over 100 years ago that food scientists recently tested and could barely believe still worked. You already have everything you need for it in your kitchen. I will see you there. Before you go, one more thing. This video gave you the overview, but inside the Old Ways Almanac, I walk you through all 10 hacks with the full thrift method, step by step. If something isn't clear, ask me directly. And a real person, me, answers you myself. You won't be doing this alone. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen, and you can cancel anytime with one click. If these tips helped you shop a little smarter, why not subscribe and stay with me? I have many more simple ideas like these waiting for you right here on the channel.